So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clawson.
All right, Michael, we have reached more than halfway into the year as we record today. It's July 10th. As always, at this halfway point, we suffer, we list make, we crucify ourselves in an effort to make sense of what we've watched so far and do a top 10 to this point. Do you have any thoughts, ruminations, or experiences in your viewings thus far that you want to mention?
Good question. We've survived the first 6 months of the year. I guess when I think about my own movie going thus far, it still feels to me like I'm very much still in pandemic viewing mode, even though theaters where we're located in Seattle have slowly started to reopen and are more or less open. A lot of the art house theaters are not. We can go to our AMCs, I think our Regals as well, but it still feels to me like, we're still a little ways from normal movie going in terms of like the fare that I'm most excited about. But we're getting there. There is reason to be hopeful for the second half of the year, I think, and there's lots I've seen that I really loved. I think, actually like a much higher percentage of the movies I've watched this year versus other years, I've really, really liked. I think it's been a very fun year so far. What about you?
Yeah, well, I would first make the point that I think that you've liked them so much because you've been able to be very selective about good virtual foreign films through the virtual cinema options, and they're pretty well curated. I think the stuff that flows through there, so I think that maybe what you're pulling from is a lot higher quality, especially after a year where they couldn't have released than perhaps in a lot of recent years. This is a very unique milieu. I guess I should mention I just saw Black Widow. Theaters in our area are at full capacity, no masks. It's kind of crazy. It's also very clear that we're still not through it, as you mentioned. It's not the same. There's not the same sense. There's a nervousness to everybody sitting there with their masks off. There's people next to you wearing masks, and it's not mandatory, but a lot of people are still doing it. So it's an interesting bounce back. This is definitely a very odd early year. A lot of my stuff is festival selections, not wide release. A lot of the wide release stuff I've found to be middling at best. I would border on terrible in that I don't have anything that was in wide release theatrically this year in my top 30. So that's kind of a reflection of, cinema at large, perhaps, and our rebound back into the theater slowly happening with F9 and Black Widow this week. But by the end of this month, July, hopefully David Lowery's Green Knight will signal art is able to be projected back in theaters again.
Yeah, I don't think I had even realized it until now that I think this is the first year in a while that I don't have a single movie on my top 10 list that I saw in a theater, which is kind of crazy. This feels like we're coming out of the pandemic. You would have thought that would have happened last year, but I think if I'm remembering my list from last year, I know like Beanpole was one that I saw in theaters just before lockdown kicked into gear in like March or April of last year. You used the word selective in describing what I've watched, and I would definitely say that is the case. When you're at home and you're deciding what to watch, I feel like there is this real leveling of the playing field when you could watch a new release and kind of roll the dice on something that you're not even sure you might or might not like, just because it's new, because it's a little buzzy, or you can just kind of follow your own sensibility, and I've definitely done a lot more of that this year so far. But I'll be curious to see if my balance kind of, or if I shift again towards new releases as theaters open up. Just have to wait and see.
I'll bet against it. I think you are watching such high quality foreign films in the virtual cinema right now that it's going to be tough for me to envision you going elsewhere. But I will say that out of my entire top 10, I only had the opportunity to see one in theaters once for 6 days, and none of those showtimes actually worked. And I think you know what film that is, but I don't want to forecast it as we are counting down. But it is a film that played at the Crest for 6 days only, with I think a 4 and like a 5:55 showtime. Like I couldn't have made either of those due to work or prior obligations.
This isn't giving too much away. I think this is a documentary, correct?
It is.
Okay, yeah, I was delighted to see that this movie made it to one of our local small theaters.
Our only landmark in all the state.
Yeah, very close by us personally. Any parameters that you followed as you made the list this year?
Same as last year. If something came out in 2020 and I just didn't have the time to see it because we see so much and it's really worth the mention, then I will bring it this year with me. And I did do that with one film, and we'll talk about her here at the top. Actually, her effort, it's I don't mind including television. I really tried not to this time. Later on in the year when we do our full list, I will include television. I do have a limited series that I'll mention. I might, if the occasion arises, do some honorable mentions of what I think is truly great television and perhaps a renaissance of comedy right now. But yeah, without further ado, I think we can get to Rising Stars.
All right. So historically in this category, we've each picked like an actor and an actress who we think are up-and-comers, emerging talents, people on the cusp of great things.
The title is stolen directly from A Star is Born. I think that we'd started this show right around the time that A Star is Born, the third remake with Gaga and Cooper, was releasing. And so we just kind of took inspiration from that and the positivity, like what a great thing to incorporate, like the future is bright into a list that is often perhaps a little bit more negative and critical than, bring some levity to it.
Totally. You want to start us off with one or the other, an actor or actress or whatever you have?
I have an actress that I can start us with. I will first talk about Sophia Koppel, the actress in Nina Thyberg's Sundance Darling Pleasure that was acquired by A24. From what I gather, this is a debut performance for her. She's never done anything in her life. She is European, and she is speaking American while she's in LA doing porn shoots, essentially, and trying to break into the industry as an adult actress. The film is very acerbic and witty, and she is very stiff in her sense of self. She's not weak, and it's a very interesting lens to kind of view this entire thing through. The experience is very harrowing at certain points, but her tough exterior and her tough interior, you kind of slowly get a sense for, and it's all in the performance. It's not in the overtness of the message of the film or anything like that. It's all what you see is what you get. Very stripped type of a storytelling, and a very stripped like character performance where it's just her delivering these feelings or these experiences physically and emotionally, and it's really convincing. And I'm terribly impressed for a first-time actress to do what she did.
Very cool. And I think this comes out later this year, yeah?
I believe so. A24 said something about fall, I think, after they acquired it, and I think that that's a good fit, but I would not be surprised if this one did get pushed. And this does start a unfortunate motif for a lot of my selections, which is going to be movies that you can't watch yet.
Yeah. On the note of parameters, that is one thing I've tried to be a little conscious of as I make my list. There's pros and cons to doing it every which way, and I think the lists are only going to get messier as theaters come back, but virtual cinemas continue and that kind of thing. But I try to limit the picks to things that are getting released commercially this year. That's just when it feels like these films are really having their moment, is when they are viewable in like somewhat ordinary circumstances, whether that's a theater or VOD or streaming. So they're commercial releases that didn't premiere like decades ago. For example, like there are more Hong Sang-soo movies coming out this year commercially for the first time that first played in Korea in like the late 90s. They don't really feel like they are just now having their moment. They represent a different moment in time. The only exceptions are movies that I just don't think will get distribution, period. And this is a change from my parameters last year, because that actually led to me leaving things off that I really shouldn't have left off, like my Mexican pretzel.
Yeah.
That would have been an overlap for us. There was a movie called The Calming that I really liked that, hasn't gotten distribution. That should have been on there. So if I just don't think it's going to come out, period, you got to give it some love somewhere. So it'll go for the year it premiered in. So more notes on parameters.
Yeah,
messy stuff.
That's why I don't do that, because there's never a guarantee of when something's going to come out. And then you might not remember it the same way that you experienced it in order to even have it on your list in the same way. So it's just, what I saw is what you get.
There you go. Anyways, that said, one of my rising stars is Noe Abita. This is an actress in a film this year called Slalom, which is directed by Charlene Favier. It is about a teenage girl at a competitive ski academy who is a highly talented skier, and she ends up in this very troubling relationship with her coach, who ends up kind of exploiting his position of power and authority over her in sexual and gross ways, and it kind of leads to this, kind of breakdown, this kind of psychological turmoil as she experiences this. I think she's a very magnetic performer. She was in another movie a couple years ago that I just caught up with called Genesee, which is a French-Canadian film by a filmmaker named Philippe Lesage, which I thought was incredible. I thought it was really, really underseen, and she stood out to me there as well. She is a French language speaker. I'm not really sure if she's actually French or French-Canadian, or where her roots are. But I think she has more French language work coming up, so this is not a pick that I think is going to necessarily like break into Hollywood, immediately by any means. But I think she's incredibly talented and magnetic as a performer. She's one that I keep getting excited about when I see her name pop up somewhere. So that's Noe Abita. She was in the movie Slalom this year.
That's a blind spot for me. I gotta catch up with that one. And now my second rising star is another actress. However, she is also a director, producer, and writer. You know who I'm going with here?
Rada Blank?
That's exactly it. I'm going with Rada Blank. She, as I mentioned, directed, produced, wrote, and acted in a film called The 40-Year-Old Version, which is, from what I gather, kind of a, one lady show version of her life, and a journey of artistic pursuit, failed artistic pursuit, the meaning of art translated down from family. There's a lot of density here, but the most impressive thing is that this is not only a directorial debut, not only a screenwriting debut for film, not only an acting debut in film, not only a producing debut in film, but it's all of those things together. And it all sticks, and it's all meaningful. This was a film that came out in very late 2020, direct to Netflix. I'd heard it mentioned on, I think, Tasha Robinson's end of the year top 10 list that she did. And it was just one of those blind spots that I didn't get to before we recorded ours. And I got to it, I think, in January or February. And it was just immediate. Like, I flicked it on expecting to fall asleep, late in the day. I just wanted to kind of catch up with something Tasha had recommended. And I was magnetized, and I stuck with that film until the very, very end, fully expecting to turn it off after 10 minutes. And I can't recommend it highly enough, and we will talk about it later.
I remember seeing this on quite a few lists. I think it was quite high on New York Times list, like Manohla Dargis, A.O. Scott. This was quite widely beloved, I think. Good movie. I like this one.
I will say they have great taste then.
Definitely. My second pick is one I have less to say about because this movie is still so fresh to me and I just saw it. The movie is Zola, which I just saw in the last week or two. And the pick is Taylor Page. It's one of the leads here. She has done a handful of other fairly high profile movies, but ones I just didn't see. I don't even know how large of roles she had in those. Like she was in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. There was one other... Yeah. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
I didn't see that movie.
Very little time, but like a crucial character.
Yeah. Zola, it's a wild movie. If you've read the Twitter thread, that's not a surprise. Taylor Page plays this young woman who makes friends very quickly with a girl played by Riley Keough, and they go on this impulsive trip to Florida where Taylor Page's character thinks they're going to be just stripping for money, and it'll be a quick and fun trip, and it becomes something she did not expect to get into whatsoever. The side eye she gives in this movie as she's standing on the sidelines of things she is so appalled by and just shocked by is too funny and super absorbing. I think she really has a cool presence on screen that was very funny and magnetic. Well, I just have to use that word again. But yeah, I'll keep it short. A lot of people, I think, still have to see this movie. But Taylor Page, really, really solid stuff.
Indeed. Not bad at pimping, too.
Not bad.
On to our number 10s. I will kick us off with the directorial debut that I just caught at the very, very end of Tribeca Film Festival 2021, Lorelei.
It's up to the side and whoop!
You want to move out of the halfway house and into your girlfriend's house? Says here she has a part-time job and has 3 children. Well, she ain't winning any Mother of the Year awards bringing you home.
It's okay. Wayland's family now.
Directed by Sabrina Doyle. This is her 3rd film, as I understand it. It is her first feature film. She'd done 2 shorts preceding this. It is not bravura. It's not auteur, really. It's not those things that we, I think, are kind of trained to look for in film, where you're looking for the next, Villeneuve or the next Nolan, where, you're looking for this really communicative type of a film language. This is a lot more stripped back, laid back, letting the dramatic beats speak for themselves, letting the actors play this scene and walk around and do a long take, and providing you with the framing of the story, but really letting the actors share it and relying on the screenplay, which is good on the page, to continue to be good in their hands. And I wish that I could say that it wasn't, but it was refreshing, which means that, you're not seeing that very often in other places. And the 2 stars here are Jenna Malone, who's probably best known for Donnie Darko, and then Pablo Schreiber, who's probably best known for American Gods, in which he plays a leprechaun, but he's also in First Man. He was in Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson, and probably his best critical film that he was involved in was Vicky Cristina Barcelona. And they're just 2 adults that are at a certain place in life. Schreiber finds himself coming out of prison after taking the rap for a biker gang, so that all his friends that were in the gang wouldn't go down, just him, for about 13 years. And he was in high school, and his high school sweetheart had a couple kids while he was gone, with other men, obviously. And she's single, and they begin to co-inhabit similar spaces and fall back into a romance that was ripped apart, against their will, that is still very fresh. And but they also have to navigate where they are at these points in their lives, which is very different. And there's a transformation that takes place, and I'll say that the ending does not define an outcome in a very, very meaningful way. I think that even if this isn't a film that you absolutely adore or put in your top whatever, ranked lists. It's a film that will stick with you if you watch it, and you'll really remember the feelings that you had along the way. And I think that that's a great mark of cinema.
Not familiar with Pablo Schreiber, I don't think at least, but I'm a big fan of Jenna Malone. That interests me for sure.
Yeah, I guess Refn. She might be known for Refn.
Neon Demon, yeah.
But I think Donnie Darko's probably a little bit more circulated.
Probably, yeah. Cool.
All right, what is your number
10? My number 10 is Atlantis.
You, your fathers and your grandfathers worked long and hard to produce a decent living for your families, but times are changing.
This is a Russian film. The director's name is Valentin Vasyanovich. This is set in the mid-2020s, so the not-too-distant future in eastern Ukraine. And it imagines that Ukraine has won this war with Russia, but it is not much of a triumphant victory for the country, and Ukraine has been left in complete and utter ruin as a result of this conflict. So we're kind of in this like post-apocalyptic sci-fi war drama, but it's all rendered in this very art house, kind of slow cinema kind of sensibility. We followed two particular soldiers who were involved in this conflict and are kind of returning home, trying to restart their lives in this totally bleak landscape that is what they find themselves in now. Both of them have pretty severe PTSD. One of them succumbs to that PTSD in a pretty striking way quite early on. That's not much of a spoiler, and we follow his close friend as he tries to kind of resume living. The film is shot almost entirely in these kind of static master shots that are just so mesmerizing and powerful. I think if anyone could, take issue with this film, they might call it too dour, too humorless, or just miserablest, and I totally get that, but I think it's a really mesmerizing movie for how it's shot. I was so compelled by the filmmaking here. And I think there's some really striking formal choices that we get, like shots that show us the world in this kind of thermal vision that we don't really have any perspective that we're attached to as we see these shots. And there's some interesting ideas, I think, about looking for warmth in a world that feels so cold and cruel after a conflict. And I think there's very much hope and optimism to be found if people are paying attention to even some really simple story details. So it's heavy stuff, but I think it's really powerful filmmaking for those who are up for it. So that's called Atlantis, and it's available on VOD for rental right now.
Sounds very Soviet influenced, very much like their grandparents and parents had been murdered ceaselessly in World War II. That sounds just as macabre as I expected.
Yeah, material-wise, yes. Stylistically, it's not like Soviet montage by any means. It's very slow and steady and measured in its pace, but materially or content-wise, very heavy stuff, yeah.
All right, we are on to our squandered actor and actress. Could be a director, whatever type of person you chose. I did go with an actor and an actress, and I'll go ahead and get us started with my squandered actor of the last too long, and that is Ty Sheridan, Michael.
Okay.
The last time I enjoyed a performance from him was the last time I enjoyed a film that he was in that I saw, and I saw that film with you.
What film was that?
That was Ready Player One.
Oh yeah, it's been a minute.
That was, I think, directly before the show started, and that was a Steven Spielberg film, 2018, I think in May. And, before that, he'd done a film called The Yellowbirds that wasn't very good, but he was very interesting in it. And then he kind of had, some down average years, but he did do the Stanford Prison Experiment, which he was very good in his role in. And before that, his first three films were The Tree of Life, Mud, and Joe. Joe being a Nicolas Cage film that he did that was really, really great. This is an actor that I have all the faith in the world in the talent. I just think that he's been in terrible project after terrible project, or project that isn't speaking to me in any way, so I didn't even know to seek it out. He did something called The Mountain, directed by Rick Alverson, co-starring Jeff Goldblum. I had no idea about it. I just, that's an indie I skipped right over. He did Dark Phoenix, which I think is probably my worst film of 2019. 2020, I don't remember the exact window, but I vehemently dislike that film. The Night Clerk is another one I skipped. And then I just did Voyagers, which was absolutely horrendous. I'm hoping he can turn it around. In the Paul Schrader film, Card Counter, I don't know how big of a role he's going to have, but he is second billed on the Letterboxd application at least. And that's co-starring with Oscar Isaac, Willem Dafoe, Tiffany Haddish. I think that if there's ever a director to get you back on track, whether you like it or not, it might be Schrader.
I like that. I am optimistic about that movie for sure.
That's mine. What is your first squandered choice, Michael?
My first one is Rosamund Pike.
Good choice.
The one film of hers this year I saw was called I Care a Lot, Netflix movie. I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
And how did you care for that film?
Not so much. I did not care for that movie a great deal. I think that's the only thing she has done this year, to my knowledge. I could be wrong about that. And there have been a handful of other movies she's done in the last couple years that I just have not even had much of an interest in seeing, though I can't say I think they're I can't say that they are bad, obviously. Haven't seen them. But man, she is an actress who I think is really great and who I like quite a bit. I think she is what makes Gone Girl a movie I like so much, and I think she does icy in a way that so few actresses do. It's so fun when she leans into her more kind of sadistic side, and that's clearly what I Care a Lot is going for. She plays a woman who is exploiting the elderly in that movie for her own financial gain, and I don't think that's a very interesting movie. I would rather see her in kinds of things like Gone Girl, not to, just typecast her, but like if I were to be kind of unrealistic in my wishes, because I don't think this is actually going to happen, but I think of her as kind of like a Hitchcock heroine in a way, like
if she had worked with Hitchcock,
well, that would be great too. But any of those, those icy blondes you associate with Hitchcock, I think all of those actresses are wonderful. She has something in common with them. I would love to, if, there's no one who I think apes Hitchcock today like De Palma does. If he was to resume that practice of his in aping Hitchcock and to cast Rosamund Pike in one of those roles, that would be spectacular. Not likely, but I will just play that out in my head. Hope she gets something better soon, though.
That does sound delicious. She was in my favorite film of 2018, Hostiles. And I will say that she was in a film in 2018 that you might have missed that is actually pretty okay. 7 Days in Entebbe, which is like a hostage film that's got international implications. She was a very interesting character in that. And I remember that distinctly because she was also in A Private War that year and Beirut that year, which were terrible. And also are just as forgettable name-wise. You already don't know which one I recommended.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. My second choice and final choice here for Squandered Actress is going to be Suki Waterhouse, who kind of exploded onto the scene, one might say, in The Bad Batch, at least in the film, world, the folks that are really paying attention to cinema rather than like pop culture. But pop culture wise, she was in the adaptation of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Sure, she got some notoriety from that, or Insurgent before that. But The Bad Batch is really where I think she kind of leapt to life. She then had a supporting role in The White Princess, which is it's a limited series headlined by Jodie Comer. Who I think that anyone that's seen Killing Eve knows and loves. And if you haven't, you just haven't seen it yet, because you will join legions of others that do. She had Assassination Nation, which I really disliked. I thought it was a very acerbic film that I could not deal with the what I would call like foolish acidity. Like it at many levels was just like a really low rent, really high philosophical, ridiculous type of a film that had a bunch of great actors, but really nothing in the marrow. So everything just kind of fell apart. And she's been in things like Detective Pikachu and more recently Seance. Creation Stories. I've seen all these films. They're all terrible films. She's good, though. She is a good actress. She's just paired with these bad movies. She had a supporting role in what I think is probably her best film since 2016, Rainy Day in New York, Woody Allen. But I just really think that she has a lot to offer and has very few opportunities. I wish that I could say that I was looking forward to a project she's involved in. Unfortunately, I'm nervous about her next couple projects, one of which is Persuasion, has one of your favorite actresses as the lead, Dakota Johnson, but it also has Henry Golding in it, which worries me because he's kind of more of a person than an actor. You know, he's playing himself in many ways when he acts, and I'm not terribly intrigued by Carrie Cracknell, who's the director's previous works. And then she also has Dolly Land from Mary Harron, who is previously the director of American Psycho and Alias Grace, and they'd worked together on a previous project, but I don't have good feelings about Salvador Dali film with Ben Kingsley. Call me jaded, but it's been a while since Ben Kingsley led a film that I thought worked.
I think you mentioned The Bad Batch. She was in that, right?
Yes.
I liked her in that movie.
That's where she
that one comes to mind. Yeah.
That was her big con.
Yeah, I liked her in that movie, for sure. Cool. Good stuff. My other squandered performer who I think is not really living up to their potential at the moment. Full transparency, I don't know how passionate I am about this pick. I struggled a little with this category. There weren't any terribly obvious contenders for me this year, but I went with Andrew Garfield, who is in the film Mainstream this year from Gia Coppola, with Maya Hawke and Nat Wolff, and a couple other familiar faces. It's kind of a social media, internet culture satire of sorts. I thought it was pretty terrible, and I thought he was pretty terrible in it. I would not really even call him like even remotely anything like my favorite actor, so I'm not saying he is someone who I love that is getting cast in bad movies like this one, but I do think he is pretty great in something like Silence, the Scorsese movie, although it sure helps when you're working with someone like Scorsese. Yeah, this is one I've chewed on less, but I do think he maybe just needs to find some directors who tap into his skill sets better than he currently has. I couldn't speak at length about what else he has in what he has in the works at the moment, but I hope it is better stuff. Leave it at that.
I do have to say I disagree about your view, but I respect it. I also thought Mainstream was bad, but I think that the least bad thing about it is him, and I think the most bad thing about it is Coppola's direction and like unwieldy understanding of what she's even trying to do to begin with. But his next
sounds like a problem.
Is Tick Tick Boom with Lin-Manuel Miranda, which is a musical, from what I understand. Then he's going to be in Showalter's The Eyes of Tammy Faye, which I'm nervous about because
I saw the trailer for that.
Do not trust him being Showalter as a director. But, I mean, previously he was in Under the Silver Lake, which I thought you responded well to.
For sure. Yeah.
He was in Breathe from Andy Serkis, which I thought you were okay with. But right before Silence, he did Hacksaw Ridge, Mel Gibson film that I thought he was stupendous in. And then 99 Homes opposite of Michael Shannon, who I think that film is also very interesting. Great dramatic.
Yeah, those are like years ago, right?
They are, but those are literally like his last projects. Right, it goes like Mainstream, and then it goes directly to Under the Silver Lake, and then I went in proper descending order of his projects. He's doing very few projects, I guess I should say.
Squandered is weird because, I mean, I guess you can take the longer term view, but I didn't look back that far in filmographies since they're the 2021 picks. I mainly focused on the 2021 movies. Yeah,
and Gia Coppola really laid an egg, and that's what you were most upset about. Mr. Palo Alto lover.
Yeah, I did like Palo Alto back in the day. This was definitely a letdown.
Yeah,
but
huge
that's
letdown
okay.
for me. Because you recommended Palo Alto to me, and I loved it, and I was like, okay, next one, here we go, and it was trashy.
Very different stuff.
All right, Michael, on to number 9. All right, Michael, at number 9, I have The Killing of Two Lovers.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
What do you call a pile of kittens?
What?
A meowton.
Come on, Dad.
Meowton!
Terrible.
Live my life, painted in a corner.
You working?
Yeah. This early?
Yeah, Dad. Stop digging.
You think we're doing the right thing?
David, I love you. You love me. We're trying to figure this out.
By the time
I'm listening, Dad.
I came to
Love is a feeling, and feelings, they move in, they move out.
darling, it already
Mom's cheating on you.
It is a drama film starring Clayne Crawford. I think I've already waxed poetic about my appreciation for him on the show a few times, and his previous roles in television and directing television, and just he really reminds me of, you know, those 1960s to 1980s guys that would just get it done whether there's explosions and metal sticking in them or not. Very much a Rick Dalton type, perhaps. For any Tarantino lovers, revisiting Once Upon a Time in Hollywood now that the novel's out.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a man who is going through separation with his wife. They've got 4 kids together, and the screw he tries to tighten, and there's something pressing on the other side that doesn't let it go in. No matter how hard he keeps trying to get dialed in, there's something pushing out. There's some misunderstanding, and he is going through this intense violence and rage that is restrained, consistently restrained, and you don't get the impression at the beginning of the film that it is going to be. I would argue that when we previewed the trailer, I did not think it would be. I thought it was going to be a murder film. But it very much was not. And instead of ever acting violently, he actually becomes the victim of violence at one point. And it is just beautifully photographed, really thoughtful, I think, in the stanzas of how it's orchestrated. Like, you really get a sense of different emotionalities building and mixing together as the film progresses. And right at a crescendo, or right when you expect the crescendo to occur, or the beat to drop, if you will, it very much ends in a way that kind of takes all the previous dramatic momentum away, and you're left there holding a bag of very fraught emotions throughout this whole process, and not really knowing what to do with this bag because you didn't get given a conventional way of dealing with it. And that's one of the things that I look for is, emotional response to cinema as well as performance and direction, and this just had it all really cohesively together. Full transparency, don't expect this to be on my top 10 at the end of the year, but I do think that it is the sign of a filmmaker coming into their own, an actor making a stamp on film, and I think the omen of very good things to come from both the director and the actor here.
This is one that I have almost watched on 3 occasions on different nights where I had a couple other movies of interest, and every time my mood has just happened to lead me in a different direction. Just purely based on the mood of the day, the circumstances, how bad the shadow is, or the light coming in through my window onto my TV is. But I'll definitely get to this one before the end of the year.
Yeah, allow me to encourage you and others with a simple, convincing argument. It is 84 minutes long.
Oh, not bad. I did not know that. That's pretty brief.
It is.
Cool.
All right, Michael, what is your number 9?
My number 9 is the only one on my list that I just don't think will get distribution, which is really unfortunate. I would love it if it did, but I don't know. We'll wait and see. It is called Short Vacation.
1차 온다. 야, 조심해. 안으로 들어. 우리 어떡해? 찍을 수가 없는데, 이거. 그냥 여기 찍자.
The South Korean film. It is co-directed by two young men whose names are Kwanmin Pyo and Han Sol Seo. This is not only a debut, but also technically a student film. It is these guys' graduation film from film school that made it into the New Directors New Films Festival earlier this year. It is also quite short. It is an hour and 19 minutes. Might be the shortest one on my list, or one of the shortest. It's about 4 middle school aged girls, Korean girls, who are a part of their school's photography club. And one of the girls is new to the school. They kind of bond all together at the start of the film. And as summer vacation approaches, the teacher who heads up this photography club gives them disposable cameras and tells them that their summer project is to take pictures of something that they think represents the end of the world. And that's as much of a prompt as they get. They can take that in any direction that they want. And so the girls kind of collectively decide, or one of them suggests that they just get on the train in their town and just take it to the end of the tracks. And maybe something about the end of the train tracks will represent like an ending of things, and there will be something there that works. It is a shockingly naturalistic movie. There is nothing like too cute about it or condescending. Sometimes it just doesn't even feel like a movie. It feels very documentary-like in how totally natural these girls are together. And they're mostly just talking about like normal things that any middle school age girl might talk about. And they're not having big epiphanies, but they are maybe just starting to think about, ideas that are a little bit bigger than the ones they ordinarily might as they do this project. One of the more striking formal choices is that when they take pictures, sometimes the movie just kind of stops in its own tracks and the photos fill up the screen and it's just silent for a second, and we watch the photos we look at the photos they've taken. And they're not usually like masterpieces by any means, but they are good and they're interesting for what the girls find interesting. Nothing terribly bad happens on the trip. Nothing terribly eventful happens. And yet it feels kind of miraculous to see these young girls being totally normal, starting to kind of, develop an interest in artistry, and think about these kind of big ideas with, in a really low-key and naturalistic way. I thought it was very, very special. It's called Short Vacation. So hopefully it'll be viewable again at some point in some form or another.
That sounds very lovely. You briefly mentioned a visual metaphor for them about the idea of the train arriving at the tracks and finding what's at the end of it. Really called to mind An Elephant Sitting Still. The end of the bus line.
Nowhere near as heavy as that film.
Sounds like it.
But I'm with you there.
All right. We are now on to Wounded Soldiers, Michael. For brevity's sake, I will say that My Wounded Soldier is The Killing of Two Lovers. It grossed a total of $70,000 USD. Based on my research, I can't imagine it had a very large release. It has had a fairly decent critical release, but I think it is still vastly underseen. And at this point in the year, there's not much grossing that I can go off of for other titles, to be perfectly frank, and everything else that's very high in my list is trending well, I think, on other locations, Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes and all that stuff. So I went with budget for this one, and I will just re-underline the directing. It's a stunning aspect ratio for the photography, a lot of natural light, great performance central to it, and a sense of emotionality that you will take with you in that bag of emotions at the end of the film.
Good stuff. My Wounded Soldier is French Exit from Azazel Jacobs, which I think made a little over $1 million at the box office worldwide, but the Metacritic score is like a 50 2, it's somewhere in the 50s for sure. Not stellar by any means. This movie does not all work, that is for sure. But I think this is a very idiosyncratic voice, and easily one of the more idiosyncratic voices you were likely to have come across at any multiplex in 2021 so far. He's kind of in the vein of like a Whit Stillman or a Noah Baumbach movie with some kind of literariness in the dialogue, but with its very own kind of brand of eccentricity that I totally think will rub a lot of people the wrong way. But there you go. Zazel Jacobs, kind of interesting filmmaker. He's the son of Ken Jacobs, very influential and acclaimed experimental filmmaker, with very much his own voice, doing something 100 or completely different from what his parents do. That I thought was very interesting, very flawed at certain points. Maybe I'll talk about that later. But yeah, French Exit, I think still worth seeking out.
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer is very fun in it, despite all the flaws that I found with the film. That's one of maybe my first trip back to theaters this year.
Oh, really? Nice.
Exit. Yeah, on to number 8.
What's your number 8?
My number 8, Michael, is a small film called Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar.
This is one I've seen.
I'm Star, short for Starbra.
Assume yours is Barbara.
Nope, just Barb. Plain old Barb.
I want to thank Barb and Star for hosting tonight's Talking Club and for making their hot dog soup. I like the salt.
I like the hot dog.
It's not as runny as it usually is.
What is she throwing?
I hope she gives me bigger teeth. Love big teeth. She loves big teeth. Even if it's just 2 eyes on a bunch of teeth.
It would be so nice.
This is one that I think a lot of people have seen. This is one that I think a lot of people either really gravitated towards or really disliked, as you'd mentioned with French Exit. I think it did rub a lot of sensibilities the wrong way with its type of comedy. It's a very dry, witty patter type of dialogue comedy. It's not set up punchline joke so much as recurring gag motif, style choices, and just absurdity. And you know, there's not much comedy coming out these days, and so when a serious comedy does come out, I think I do cherish it more than any other type of genre because of how rare it is that a good comedy comes out. And I would underline the word good here for Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. It is a good comedy. It's a revisitable comedy. Like Anchorman, it's something that in 5 years you will make a joke from the line of and maybe forget where you got that joke from. And then maybe 10 years from now, you'll turn it back on and go, man, this is just a great one. And there's really a decreasing amount, I think, from when we were, in the 2000s and the 90s of the level of comedy coming out now. I think maybe right when we graduated was like Superbad and, just this great Judd Apatow and Seth Rogen kind of surgence of comedy from this one group of guys for American comedy, and then Borat was coming out at that time, but then it's been really middle since then. I guess Tropic Thunder was probably right in that range, so it's kind of interesting for me to look at it from like a film history standpoint, where it's like, where are the good comedies? And when you find one, you really want to hold it up and say, you got to go to Vista Del Mar to visit Barb and Star. This is directed by Josh Greenbaum, not really notable for its direction so much as it's impressive that it doesn't ever mess with itself. I think he'd previously done a couple documentaries, and that really shows up with just kind of, getting everything in the right spot and then letting it go. A lot of the choreography, I think, is really superb, maybe the best choreography of the year. And our star is Kristen Wiig and Anna Mumolo, and Annie also wrote the film and produced it. So I would just cement her as a treasure of filmmaking and voices. Do you have anything you want to say since you did see it?
Oh, very funny movie. I mean, easily the best comedy I've seen all this year. I think I've only seen like a few. It just to reiterate what you said, they just feel like they are few and far between. So you have to cherish the good comedies that come along these days. This is definitely one of them.
And I think this might be the last produced Sanchez film. I'm not positive on that, but I do know that Farrell and McKay are kind of dissolving the Gary Sanchez Productions and the Gloria Sanchez Productions deals that they had, and like refocusing stuff. So, this might signal kind of the end of an era that brought us Casa de Padre and Anchorman and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely feels like it's could have just as easily come out 5 years ago or 10 years ago and just fit right in among those for 100%. Sure.
So if you liked Bridesmaids, which Annie also wrote, Joy from Aronofsky, which she also wrote, Megan Levy, which she also wrote, then maybe give Barb and Star a try. I think you'll enjoy your trip to Vista Del Mar.
There you go. I like it.
What is your number 8, Michael?
My number 8 is called The Disciple.
भारतीय शास्त्रीय संगीताला मार्गी संगीत उगीच नाही म्हणत.
It's an Indian film. The director's name is Chaitanya Tamhani. I think it's the only film. It's definitely the only film on my list that you can currently stream on Netflix. I can't believe I ended up actually getting a Netflix movie on here. I have heard some people call this like an Indian Whiplash, which I kind of get. It is about a man trying to pursue excellence in regards to his musical craft. He practices a classical form of Indian singing. I think it's called Hindustani. And we kind of meet him in his, I want to say, 20s or so, as he is already kind of in the midst of honing his craft and trying to become one of the greats. We see some of his childhood in flashbacks, and then we follow him in middle age. There is a cut at a certain point that leaps us forward in time. So we end up really seeing kind of a whole lifetime, which is not much of a spoiler to say that it's kind of about someone who doesn't really make it and what that looks and feels like. It's very much about him coming to a point where he's sort of questioning the tension between wanting to pursue more commercial opportunities versus excellence in this tradition he has always valued so deeply. And he comes to kind of start to interrogate what all is wrapped up in that tradition and what's authentic or not authentic about it. So content-wise, I think I get some of the Whiplash comparisons, but that have been thrown out there. Pace-wise, I don't see it at all. This is a very contemplative, rather slow-paced film where, like, much of the performances start with the camera quite far back and zoom in very slowly over the course of a whole performance until it kind of arrives close to his face and you see him processing his own kind of performance as he does it. Really, really compelling filmmaking. And it's on Netflix, so easily watchable. It's called The Disciple.
Awesome. I wish I had the sneeze, because when you were talking about the zooming in, I just really wanted to go, Chong Sang Soo.
Oh, much slower zooms for sure.
Yeah, but still, I'm fresh off of Sang Soo, and man, does he like to zoom in and then zoom out in the same scene.
He loves to zoom, that's for sure.
All right, Michael, we are on to ensembles. My ensemble at this midpoint in the year is an HBO Max film directed by Steven Soderbergh by the name of No Sudden Move. To no surprise of anyone, Soderbergh is going to appear in this list. The ensemble here is headlined by Don Cheadle. Co-star is going to be Benicio del Toro, and then we have a lot of other players. David Harbour, who many know from Stranger Things, but was just in Black Widow. The always memorable Ray Liotta. John Hamm, Brendan Fraser, Kieran Culkin, Amy Seimetz, Julia Fox, Frankie Shaw, Noah Jupe, Bill Duke. It's a who's who of great actors, and each of them are distinctive in their vision of who they are within the film and what they're signifying. It's obviously debatable, but if you interpret the film as I have, you definitely see a lot of undercurrents of racism and classism and all sorts of things, and that's really passively told with the way that certain characters are shown, portrayed, dressed, told to behave in front of the camera. It's very much a CinemaScope-esque style film, so it's very wide, and when you have this much talent packed into a film, it certainly helps to have a wide lens.
Got to get all those people in there.
Exactly.
Naturally.
That is a brief conversation about a film that we will talk about at a later time. On to your ensemble choice.
My ensemble choice is French Exit, which I've already talked about, so I'll keep it kind of brief. I didn't really describe the movie's story previously, but it's about Michelle Pfeiffer and her character and her son and her husband, who is dead, played by Tracy Letts. He's dead. Michelle Pfeiffer's character and her son, played by Lucas Hedges, burn through all their cash. She's like a wealthy socialite, and they move from New York City to Paris to live in a friend's place. The ensemble has Michelle Pfeiffer, Lucas Hedges, Imogen Poots. One actress I really liked was named Valerie Mahaffey. While this movie tips into some of the territory of the occult at certain points, with a cat that may or may not contain the spirit of a character who had passed away. Yeah, I don't think much of that specifically works at all. But in terms of this as an ensemble piece, there is a way in which everyone in this movie is delivering their dialogue with the very particular precision and carefulness that I think invites out and keeps bringing the word literary to mind. And the way everyone on this movie is just so on the same page, and is so just so game for what this movie is going for in its delivery. I think is very cool. I think that's actually makes for some pretty impressive direction, that everyone is really so aligned in how exactly they are approaching their characters with a certain kind of precision. But yeah, that's French Exit.
All right, Michael, on to our number 7s.
What's your number 7?
My number 7 is a documentary film that premiered at Sundance earlier this year by the name of Sabaya. Can't remember if we'd already talked about this briefly in person or not, but I guess for the listeners, I will also give a breakdown of the film rather than just you. It is a junior film effort from director Hogir Harori, and it is a harrowing one. The description of the film, which I think puts it better than I will be able to, is with just a mobile phone and a gun, Mahmoud, Ziad, and their group risk their lives trying to save Yazidi women and girls being held by ISIS as Sabaya, abducted sex slaves, in the most dangerous camp in the Middle East, Al-Hol in Syria. That is an accurate description of the film. It's almost impossible to imagine being a documentary filmmaker behind the lines with this group of men and their family who are risking it all in a really, old pickup truck in the back. They're driving into the center of the storm to go find these girls that have been kidnapped and bring them back to their home, where they will slowly try to help them reacclimate to not being abused, owned, and treated like cattle, but rather as a person, and then eventually trying to bring them back to their loved ones and their families. It is at once enraging and depressing, but also hopeful and joyous in the sense that there's a family out there with literally like nothing compared to, first world standards, and they're spending all their time, their effort, and their energy to go save women and girls from hell, essentially. And they're not doing it for money. They're not doing it for even honor or anything. They're just doing it because it seems right to them at some foundational level. And they have their own family. They live with the mother, and they have a wife, and they have kids. And all those people are helping these girls that they save be restored together. And you're watching them put in just as much effort homemaking and taking care of the young girls and cleaning and giving them a sense of purpose and distracting them with home life. It's a truly incredible documentary film. I don't think I've seen anything close to this recently, and I don't know when it's going to come out, but I think it is a very important film, which I use delicately, but I really do think that in this case it is.
So it does sound harrowing to do this on the right day, that's for sure.
Definitely. What is your number 7, Michael?
My number 7 is Undine. From Christian Petzold, German filmmaker. We talked about this last year when we talked about movies from the Vancouver International Film Festival and the New York Film Festival, because I think it was playing at both at the time. Those festivals kind of more or less overlapped. I was going back and listening to a little bit of what I said on that episode about Undine, and I realized I regret not expressing more enthusiasm for this movie at the time, and I think I was too stuck in the mindset of comparing this just to Christian Petzold's previous effort, which was Transit, which came out just the year before.
Which you adored.
I really love that movie, and I still think that Undine's probably not as good as Transit, but then, taking stock of where we are at this point in the year, there's no question that this is still one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I think it's just really cool, kind of mixture of kind of mundane realism with fairy tale fantasy. Same actors as Transit, Paula Beer and Franz Rogowski. She plays this historian who lectures on Berlin's urban development. He's an industrial sea diver. Like right away, just the professions alone are like ones that like you don't normally see in movies. That like just catches my attention. And there's a romance of sorts develops between them after she breaks off a relationship with another man. I think it's just a totally unique mode that he is working in, and how he brings out these really kind of, old ideas, like, things related to the myths of the Undine, and brings them into these really modern, urban, contemporary contexts. That's just totally unique. I think they're super interesting. And I think it's very romantic. One of the funnier tweets I saw about this movie was somebody saying, find yourself a person who looks at you the way Franz Rogowski looks at Paula Beer when she's talking about the history of urban development in Germany. And it's so true. Like, it's arguably like so boring what she's talking about from a certain perspective, but he is looking at her in this movie with such fondness and affection and love. I think Petzold is very much a romantic, and he puts it in these really kind of oddly mundane context. I think super cool. So that's Undine, and that is available on VOD now for rental and purchase, I guess.
I completely endorse this, as I loved that film last year as well. All right, Michael, we are on to the supporting actor-actress category, and my first selection here is going to be Daniel Kaluuya from the film Judas and the Black Messiah. This is a film that is on HBO Max, as I understand it. It also had a brief theatrical release early on, but this is a title that we're actually going to have the introduction to from one of our team members, Alexander Reams. So let's hear what he had to say about this performance.
Hello, my name is Alexander Reams. I'm currently based in North Carolina, and I'm going to be introducing Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah for Best Supporting Actor on Taylor Baker's list. The film is about the attempted capture of Black Panther chairman Fred Hampton, portrayed by Kaluuya, and the rat, Judas, who turned over Hampton to the FBI, played by Lakeith Stanfield. Now, the film is mostly from Lakeith Stanfield's point of view, with most of us not learning a lot about Fred Hampton, who he is as a person, more about O'Neill. However, it's still riveting nonetheless. Kaluuya has already won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor thanks to the Academy's extended guidelines and release date lines for films that were released during the COVID-19 pandemic. Kaluuya's win was absolutely deserved. The nuances that he brought to Chairman Fred were clearly a sign of his greatness as an actor and how much he has grown since his breakout role in Jordan Peele's Get Out, for which he was also nominated for Best Actor. His performance physically affected me. By the end of the film, I was tearing up because his story is so sad. His life was cut off far too shortly by people who wanted to suppress his voice, and the film clearly lets you know its thoughts on that, but also in a smart way to where you don't feel as if you're getting beaten over the head with a sledgehammer, and a lot of that is thanks to Daniel Kaluuya's performance. The quieter moments with his lover Dominique Fishback in the film, to the loud moment, particularly when he is released from prison, and the scene that was shown all throughout the Oscar season and in the trailer, I am a revolutionary, in the church scene was just absolutely riveting and is definitely the best supporting actor of 2021 so far.
All right, Michael. I think that I agree with just about everything Alexander said there, if not every single thing. It never hurts for me to be in the same ballpark, ideology, thoughtfulness as the Oscars themselves. You know, that gives a little bit more credence to some of my selections, so it doesn't hurt that he did win that supporting Oscar. I do think that, you know, there's a couple things that I would want to mention. First being, I think right when Get Out came out, Jordan was lamenting how little people understood of Kaluuya's range and talent. And I think that this is one of the first times since Get Out that we really got a good look at that. The second would be building on that, his physicality in this performance. I believe he gained a fairly significant amount of weight, and he clearly acts as if he has that weight, whether it was added to his frame or he was wearing it, I'm not sure, with his background for preparing for the performance. But he looks like a totally different person than the kid in Get Out here. And we're only 2 years later shooting-wise, 3 years later shooting-wise, and it's just a totally different look. I really think that he has the possibility of doing what Christian Bale has done, with morphing his body and showing his talent as an actor by becoming a chameleon and fitting the role and making himself be the character rather than bringing the same actor to the same movie, no offense, Nicolas Cage, every time, and playing a different version of himself.
Yeah, so this movie's in a weird spot, having already won stuff at the Oscars, but it premiered in 2021. It came out in 2021. It's like the only time the Oscars are like ahead of list making among critics. Very odd, but yeah, good, great acting for sure.
This is another Sundance film in my list. I think that's by far the most important festival or useful festival that I've attended this year. What is your supporting actor or actress that you want to start with?
Supporting actor is really category fraud on my part. He's arguably kind of a co-lead, but it's Jeremy Renier from Slalom, which I already mentioned a little bit. He's probably best known for some of his work with the Dardennes, or at least that's how I tend to think of him. He was in movies like Kid with the Bike and The Promise.
Which we talked about at length.
We did, on a Dardennes-focused episode. Check that one out. That's a good one. But yeah, you know, like I mentioned, he is the character in Slalom who is putting this teenage girl in a deeply troubling position as he, you know, wields a certain degree of power over her as her coach, her skiing coach. You know, these are just the kinds of roles that can very easily just become a little bit too villain-ish, too sort of unambiguously cruel, but I think he remains very human throughout this whole film, which is a very focused character study as someone who is just deeply flawed and deeply misguided in what he's doing. I think he's a very solid performer. I'd like to see him even more than we do. It's Jeremy Renier in Slalom. Who is your favorite supporting actress so far?
My favorite supporting actress is Beatrice Dallet from the film Lux Eterna. I think that she's probably best known to film fans as the star of a film called Betty Blue from 1986. She's done various assortment of other films that are kind of off people's radars. The largest one, other than that, would probably be Night on Earth in 1991, which I think she plays a supporting role in. But here, again, she plays a supporting role. However, it's a big role because she is the director of the film being shot within the film Lux Eterna. She opens the film in her own square frame beside another square frame that has Charlotte Gainsbourg's character. They're each aptly titled within the film, a very creative, original title for the cast, Beatrice and Charlotte. This continues to Carl Guzman as Carl and every actor as being named after themselves. And she is playing the director of a film that is not ever really coherently described in any way other than sexy witches and being crucified as sexy, and Beatrice kind of explaining why she finds all this stuff sexy. I think in 2018 she famously said that she really likes Christ because he was the original guy that got into bondage or something to that effect. You know, like she's very very noé in her sensibility as a person and her vocality and maybe eccentricism. But her performance here is just completely convinced. You never doubt for a moment that she is who she is, that she was an actress, and that this is her first film, and that she really does want to connect on these armchairs with Charlotte at the beginning of the film, and just how upset and slippery the film continues to get, and how angry she is and how annoyed she is by the camera following her constantly and all these men working against her, which really underlines this monologue she delivers at the beginning. There's probably more juicy performances, but as far as a performance that really is central to a film working from a supporting actress, I really just, I can't stop thinking about this one compared to any other so far this year.
Yeah, Beatrice Dahl is someone who I think is like slowly within maybe just this past year even like become one of my favorite actresses. I would think like among cinephiles she's maybe best known for her work with Claire Denis. Like she's the lead in Trouble Every Day, Denis' take on like the vampire movie. She's in The Intruder. And you know, it's funny, that quote about bondage I think is sort of connects with her work with Denis, because Claire Denis is so interested, you know, all things corporeal and the physical body. And Betty Blue is great. I think that one, I think, is sometimes criticized for her being kind of like the manic pixie dream girl there, but if anyone's going to do it, it's her. She's great. And that's, Lux Eterna is one I would really like to rewatch. At some point.
Yeah, I think if anybody has the backbone to play Manic Pixie Dream Girl and not be it, it's also her.
Good stuff.
All right, Michael. Who is your favorite supporting actress so far?
I have Molly Gordon from Shiva Baby, which is
good.
A film that really had, like, kind of a splashy debut, I feel like. I think this has gotten a lot of buzz. Shiva Baby, that is. It's debut film. Emma Seligman is the director's name. We mainly focus on a young girl attending a Shiva and all the kind of awkwardness that ensues when our lead's sugar daddy is in attendance at this Shiva, and there's all kinds of social awkwardness and tension. But Molly Gordon is the like ex-girlfriend of our lead character, who I think, man, there's one other movie that's escaping me that she was in. Oh wait, I think it was Booksmart that she also had a small role in. She's always just catching my eye as someone who I think is super funny, and I don't. She just kind of has it. I don't know that I have that much more to say about this one. I'll keep it brief. Many people have seen Shiva Baby at this point. I really like that movie. I think she's very funny, very good. That's Molly Gordon.
Great comedic screen presence. The camera really wants to spend time with her. She really draws the camera in. All right, Michael. On to number 6. We're halfway there almost.
What is your number 6?
My number 6 is a film that I opened talking about, The 40-Year-Old Version.
How are you? Good. Archie tells me you're teaching.
How's somebody who ain't had no real hit gonna tell me how to write a play? She ain't no Tyler Perry.
I did win a 30 Under 30 award. Yes, it was quite a couple of years ago. What do I gotta do? Write a slave musical, an all-white play? This some bullshit. It rang a little inauthentic. I asked myself, did a black person really write this? This some fucking bullshit. Bullshit.
Think about me doing hip-hop.
Doing what to it?
I want to make a mixtape about the 40-year-old woman's point of view.
Why my skin so dry? Why am I yawning right now? Why them AARP niggas sending shit to my house? This is 40.
From Rada Blank, who, as I mentioned, directed, wrote, stars, produced the film. It is a story about a woman who is middle-aged, doesn't really like her career, doesn't really view her career as a career so much as a job, and she's looking to pursue these artistic passions, the same as her mother, and she's realizing that the artistic passion that she was going for maybe isn't the one that she wants to pursue anymore, and she becomes interested in turning her poetry into rap and becoming a rapper in a maybe a reverse order to the common story of rap, where you know, for her, she's lived a long life, and she's come from artists, and she's lost a parent, and she has estranged relationships, and she has done poetry and all sorts of art, and now she's finding rap as maybe a cohesive way of channeling all of that. And I think it's a really touching, beautiful story at its core, but it's also just immaculately constructed. It's so carefully and tenuously created, and every emotional beat, she really understands what's going on there. It feels like a play. It feels like someone spent years running through this and finding all the weak spots and just ironing those out. And even though it's over 2 hours, it doesn't ever have a moment that you feel like you can really cut and still get the full character trajectory. And I think that's the sign of a very talented playwright who's willing to kill all their darlings, but actually understands their source material and keeps everything that works to build a cohesive vision. And I don't think that there's any directorial debut that I've seen in the last 2 years, I'll include 2020, that offers a more exciting future for a writer-director than this one. And the fact that she can act and produce too is just gravy. But as a writer-director, I think this is by far away the most promising talent that we've encountered. And this is on Netflix.
Easy to watch. It's a good one.
All right, Michael, what is your number 6?
My number 6 is The Woman Who Ran.
진짜? 처음이에요. 5년 만에. 5년 동안 한 번도 떨어져 본 적이 없다고? 단 한 번도. 단 하루도 떨어져 있어 본 적 없어요. 그 전에. 하루 종일 붙어 있는 것도 못 견디겠더라고.
넌 누구랑 했어?
그냥 남자. 그냥 어떤 남자랑 했지. 너가 모르는.
which is another film from Hong Sang-soo, who's on my list last year as well. The always prolific Hong Sang-soo. This is his 24th feature, if I'm not mistaken. It's played at the New York Film Festival last year, and I think some of the European festivals, but it just came out this week, and it plays Seattle's Northwest Film Forum next week. So the time is now to talk about The Woman Who Ran. I don't think I'm the first person to say that. I think this is one of Hong Sang-soo's more accessible movies. He's very often talked about for his kind of like structural and narrative tricks and gambits. This is, I think, one of his more narratively straightforward movies. Kim Min-hee, one of his regulars, plays a woman who is married, and when her husband goes on a business trip, she goes and has these different encounters with old friends. I think it's kind of roughly divided into 3 different encounters, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it's sort of a 3-chapter film. I could use some of the same descriptors that I used for Short Vacation to describe this a little bit. It's very low-key. It's quite naturalistic in the dialogue. I think it's, like some Hong Sang-soo movies, pleasurable just for its kind of interest in the nuance and subtleties of human conversation. Here it's particularly interested in women, and women who are all kind of in different places in their lives romantically. They're all kind of talking about their relationship statuses. This is not one that passes the Bechdel test by any stretch, but I think it's a very, very elegant movie. And that comes out, and is out some places right now, comes out soon in other places. That's The Woman Who Ran.
I think it's one of the smartest titles of the year.
Oh, I do like this title quite a bit.
I think that it works at many different levels that are arguable, and that is, yeah, one of the best translations for any of his films, probably, and the title.
Cool.
All right. Let's get on to our directorial debut favorites of the year. I will go first. All right, so my directorial debut choice is also my number 5 here, Michael. So I'm going to just do a longer double dip, and we're going to talk about Sofia Koppel again, and the film that she stars in, Pleasure, directed by Nina Thyberg, coming out hopefully later this year after it was acquired at A24 at Sundance. This is easily my second favorite film that played at Sundance. The other being Next, my number 4. I also can't wait to talk about that one. This is I think I've already said it, but you have to say it again. It's an acerbic, witty criticism. It's a very self-aware film that knows what it's doing and how it's viewed socially to do what it's doing, which is talk about pornography and sex work and all that stuff. It has porn industry professionals in the film. It's almost entirely made up of people that work in the adult industry, other than Koppel herself, as far as who's starring in the film. I think they attended real award shows and stuff. I think it was called the AVN, the Adult Video, I don't know what the N would be for, awards, but it is not something that you've ever really seen before in film. I guess Sean Baker does have Red Rocket coming out, so, this might be more of the beginning of a cresting wave rather than a single wave lapping on the shore that is shallow. It's hard for me to talk about the contents of the film, number one, because of the explicit quality that it has, and number two, because it would give a large portion of listeners a spoiler. And unlike 40-Year-Old Version, this hasn't been sitting around on Netflix for a year. So I will say that there's a character arc here that is disturbing to watch for the viewer, but not disturbing for the person that's going through it. And that strength of character is really what keeps the film from ever getting too disgusting, I guess, because there's certainly moments that in other hands would be treated as if it was a grotesque moment, but here it is all business, and they're squirting lubricant just as often as they're washing their hands, and they're talking about tests just as often as they're driving cars. It's a very kind of an LA film that is very European in its sensibility about its openness to talk about sex and its willingness to put a female voice to a industry that, pays women the most, that arguably spends the most screen time probably with women than men. And it's a male constructed industry, and it really does take what I think is a feminist viewpoint and really showcases that in a brilliant way that is witty and criticizing.
I have to imagine this will be much discussed when it does eventually come out.
I expect so. I hope that I'm not on the other side of a loaded barrel, and that most of the rest of the film community does enjoy this one, because it will be very hard to defend if it's largely disliked.
Yeah, makes sense.
What is your favorite debut of the year?
I think I'll just wait and just skip this section because I have it in my number one slot at the moment, and let's just save it.
All right, let's save it and get to your number 5.
My number 5 is About Endlessness.
Är det inte fantastiskt ändå?
Vilka då?
Allt. Allt. Allt är fantastiskt.
Jo.
This is from Roy Andersson, the Swedish filmmaker. This is out now on VOD. It's a very interesting movie in that it doesn't have much of a traditional narrative arc. This is really a series of vignettes, each of which have a very dioramic kind of quality to them. I think most of the vignettes in this movie are shot in single takes. If anyone has seen a Roy Andersson movie before, I don't think they would be surprised by the aesthetic here, which color-wise is very gray and white. It's kind of like, it almost has this kind of gloomy snow globe-like aesthetic that almost feels a little bit silent cinema-like. We meet different citizens of this kind of gray, gloomy city as they experience different indignities, absurdities, little sufferings of human life, with occasional grace notes. It is, very much about people dealing with life's tragedies and their troubles in this very deadpan, kind of tragic comic tone. He's a really interesting director, I think, for how he approaches some really, really bleak subject matter with this really, at the end of the day, black comic touch that can be really funny and very much with moments of hope. We see people in this movie like soldiers marching off to their death. We also see a group of teenagers erupting into dance when they hear a song they come on like for no apparent reason. Very much an art film, but I think it's meticulously shot. It's all constructed within Roy Andersson's own studio, and I think most of the backgrounds are painted. Really, really beautiful. And for something that feels like it's about really big ideas, like the natural suffering that life involves. It's only an hour and 18 minutes. I actually think it goes by very quickly. I would not describe this as a slog whatsoever, despite some of the heaviness of its material. Really beautiful stuff. That's About Endlessness, available for rental now.
That's my The Killing of Two Lovers for You, where it's just like I've wanted to sit down and watch this movie so many times, and I just always find a way to talk myself out of it. I just go to you're gonna have to read for a while. It's it's gonna take a while for you to land in it. You might have to restart the film after you finally get acclimated. It's one that I've been meaning to see, but continue to talk my way out of. So maybe I will now.
Yeah, I guess I should say that like a good number of films on my list are foreign language movies. I have a couple that are English language, but none of these are even like remotely like Sorkin-ish movies, right? I think if anything, just generally I lean towards things that are less dense with dialogue. So there is only so much dialogue to even read in some of these movies, if that encourages anybody who is struggling with subtitles. One of my picks on here doesn't have any dialogue at all, so don't let the fact that it's foreign like steer you off from it.
For me, it's not that it's foreign. It's that, we just got done with work and now we're going to go work out. And then is there really bandwidth to properly interpret a film where you have to read it and view it at the same time? That's normally where I get my hang-up. So I'll make sure I get to it before the end of the year.
Cool.
On to OSTs. My favorite soundtrack of the year, Michael, you're well aware of, and that is Nicholas Britell's score for The Underground Railroad. I think it has one of the most memorable themes so far of the year. It's got a great violent string theme that really crescendos in kind of triplets, just bam, 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 then kind of a lull with some nice undertones, and then back to the bam, bam, bam. And we've talked about Britell before. He's, working with Barry Jenkins again here. He's underlining dramatic moments, great scenes, building a sense of dread where we don't quite know how to feel yet due to the genius acting from some of these actresses and actors. Joel Edgerton is a very interesting character arc that I think the music really informs here. And then I'll talk more about Thiso later. But my favorite soundtrack of the year by far is Nicholas Britell's score for The Underground Railroad. Series now playing on Amazon Prime, and we might talk about this one again.
We did get your number 5 pick, right? Did we somehow skip?
It was a double debut, and number 5 was Pleasure.
Got it. That's right. I thought we had got off track. We're good. Back to me for OST then, yeah?
Back to you for OST.
Favorite music of the year. What I have in this slot, my favorite soundtrack of the year, favorite score of the year, is from Zola, which was done by Mika Levy. I think the sound of this movie has been much talked about because this, film story was born out of a Twitter thread, and it very much has, these internet, these sounds that are evocative of the internet, like the sounds of tweets and that kind of thing. To me, it's striking just because of how different of a kind of score this is from what we normally get from Mika Levy, which, I feel like she's best known for stuff like her work in Under the Skin, or Jackie, which are really like scores with a real sense of dread latent deep in them.
A deep brood.
Yeah, and this is something that almost leads a little bit more towards like irony at times than something very sincere. There are sounds in here that sound like little like jewelry boxes almost. There's something very innocent about it, and this is movie very much about girls who are very much shedding their innocence in a certain way, or maybe you could argue something like that. Just totally different kind of sound from, I think, what we have come to expect from Mika Levy, which just goes to show, I think, the range she has as a composer, and is just still definitely one of the best we have, I think, working today. So that's Zola for Best Score of the Year.
You want to hear a story about how me and this bitch here fell out? It's kind of long, but it's full of suspense.
I support that choice. All right, Michael, on to number 4. All right, this is another Sundance film that is not yet available widely, but I believe just went through a brief theatrical release and might still be playing in like LA and New York. That is Theo Anthony's All Light Everywhere.
So we're going to do some calibration exercises. To begin, just look forward on the screen and just follow my direction. Relax. Close your eyes. Keep them closed. Relax.
I believe God sees everything, and that He not only sees where you are, but also what you're doing and what you're thinking.
The point is to ensure that everyone is acting in a professional manner, as always.
These kids don't care about no camera. They know they being watched.
We will be talking about our favorite... Did we already talk about favorite documentary?
I think that's yet to come.
We will be talking about favorite documentary in one more, so I'll just double up here and talk about All Light Everywhere forever, and say, so that there's a bit of a motif, I think, to some of my selections here, which is the way that we're viewing stories, and then by the end kind of having that be reframed, or films that are examining how we're framing what we value in our minds. I think that the 40-Year-Old Version does that. I think Pleasure does that with an acerbic criticism. I think that The Killing of Two Lovers does that by twisting things on its head. I have another film coming up at number 1 that we've already mentioned that does that. And I think that All Light Everywhere is one of the few documentaries that really shows a self-examination of the documentarian himself and how he is coloring his films with his own ideology, with his own belief structure, with his own camera, with his own light source, and how his entire background is coloring the film to be different, but also trying to play chess essentially against himself and say, this is what I think, what is the opposite think? And then he's just trying to capture that, and even if he can't capture it right, he's trying to explain the synopsis of the basic hypothesis that he's asking and let you look at him try to solve it. And I don't think that he does. I don't think that you can. But I think that the entire endeavor is really beautiful and just a stunning hypothesis for a documentarian to take, a a really endeavoring journey to try to look for any version of truth, and how different people experience different truths and have different basic realities that you can't tap into, and just trying to collect that. It starts out with a look at Axon, which is the rebranded name of the company Taser, which serves for most, if not, I think you could say all, but it's not technically true, but in general, all police forces for their body cams and their non-lethal weapons. And it just starts in their office spaces with a very harrowing look, and then we end up in community centers in Baltimore where they're debating whether or not there should be an eye in the sky capturing photos at the street level. It's philosophically deep at a broad social level. It's also philosophically deep at a very particular level, and it has all these different asides to the history of observing light, the history of observing and recording things through images, and the troubling past that itself has, and how these all work, because it's all constructed technology largely from one particular group of people who are making these pieces of technology, not from another. And it doesn't pass judgment, it just tries to show. And I think that there are certain scenes that speak for themselves where they test out Axon gear, where it's hard not to take away a certain type of message, at least I did, about that is very troubling. But I do think that he didn't... at no point does he force it. He shows it to you and kind of smirks to see it. You can see him smirking through the film. And if you agree with him, it might be charming. If you disagree, it probably won't. This is definitely my favorite documentary of the year. This is one of my favorite films of the year. This is one of my favorite documentaries of the last decade. It's a truly incredible film, and I think everyone should watch it once it's available. That's All Light Everywhere, directed by Theo Anthony, who previously did Rat Film.
Good movie, too.
Great movie.
Yeah, this is one I'm definitely still chewing on. It's been a few weeks now since I saw it. I'm still wrestling with it a little bit, but I'm a fan as well, for sure.
It's very dense. I would like to rewatch it.
Yeah. Cool. Where are we at?
What is your number 4?
My number 4 is called Friends and Strangers.
If a man had stolen a pound in his youth and had used that pound to amass a huge fortune, how much was he obliged to give back? The pound he'd stolen only, or the pound together with the compound interest accruing upon it, or all his huge fortune? What do you think?
Which is directed by a filmmaker named James Vaughn. He's an Australian filmmaker. It's his debut film. If I have this right, he first made a short film like 4 or 5 years ago before this feature came out. So he has kind of an interesting career path, if I have that right, and there's not any intervening work. This played at New Directors, New Films earlier this year. And it is probably going to turn off anyone who is just tired of the kind of thing where you're seeing like 20-something-year-olds who are kind of aimless and purposeless in their lives, not quite sure knowing what it is that they want to do. And even if they did know, they probably couldn't articulate it very well. Some people, I think, are just tired of that kind of thing right now, which is a little bit mumblecore-ish. That subgenre kind of came to mind. Yeah, I think that could maybe work. I've seen a lot of people kind of talk about this in reference to Hong Sang-soo and Eric Romer, but narratively, we start out with a young man and a young woman in Sydney who are both recently out of breakups. Like I said, they're probably in their 20s. They go on this little camping trip together. The young guy is clearly interested in the girl, and he makes some fumbling attempts to flirt and kind of connect with her. It's this very sort of absurdist comic tone that it strikes in the first 30, 40 minutes or so. Very funny, really strikingly shot with just some really interesting kind of like canted angles of Sydney that make it feel kind of alien or something like that. It's just really immediately interesting in its place setting. And then 30 or 40 minutes into the movie, it takes a total right turn, and we lose one of the characters that we've been following, and we stick with the male character, and we learn a little bit more about him specifically. We learn he's a videographer, and we follow him on this trip to a client's house where he's going to be filming his client's daughter's wedding. And that tone carries through this kind of absurdism with a little bit of dread somewhere that you're not even really sure what to attribute to. There's this very funny device where they're at a house for most of the film, and they hear music coming over into their house from the next door neighbors, which is this very unsettling music, which has this impact on the scene as we watch it, but there is this kind of diegetic reason for it within the film, which has this just really interesting effect. And yeah, so that's kind of the territory it's in. What makes it extra interesting is that there's also this kind of attention to kind of like key Australian landmarks around Sydney that sort of reflect different aspects of Australian history that, you know, serve as reminders of it as a former British colony. And it's sort of tricky to figure out what this movie is doing with that. Like, is it something about these 20-something-year-olds being too distracted with their own problems to sort of pay any attention to their own history? Is it something about these characters trying to find their own identity with Australia still, you know, in some way missing some sense of identity? They're just really totally unique kinds of things it's doing storytelling wise. So that's coming out later this year from Grasshopper, and that's called Friends and Strangers.
I'll have to seek it out. All right, Michael, we are on to actor and actress in a lead role, our favorites of the year. I'll get us started by talking about a fellow that I've already waxed poetic about a little bit, being Clayne Crawford, who plays the lead in the film The Killing of Two Lovers. People probably know him best from the, I think it was a Sundance television show called Rectify, as well as, what would it be? The big three channels, one of them, maybe Fox. He was playing the Mel Gibson role for Lethal Weapon, the television adaptation. And he had directed some of those episodes as well as some other television. He's a very kind of nuts and bolts actor where, you know, he's just going to do what the guy would do and then kind of work through the emotions organically in front of the camera. And I really, really like that. I respond very highly to senses of real, original emotion that someone's going through. The side effect of that can be claims of a toxic workplace or, you know, violence or, you know, argumentative type of situations, which is famously why Lethal Weapon was canceled. And there were lawsuits filed and everything because of his style as a director and actor and his brutishness, you could say. But you also get the sense that if Cassavetes wasn't yet gone, this is a guy that would have worked well with him. You know, this is a real, I guess, bravado style actor where he's going to go feel the emotion in front of everyone, and we all have to reckon with that, including him. And he doesn't need to be macho. He doesn't need to be heroic. You know, a lot of actors, you know, would have things rewritten or reframed so that they look heroic or they look good. And this is a guy that's willing to take a beating, but he'll only do it if it serves the purpose and he can map onto it and really get there. And I just whenever I see him, I just keep falling in love with him as a performer. And I think that there's no better performance by an actor that has to do as much as this. I think Cheadle in No Sudden Move is great. There's a lot of other actors that I think are great, but I think that what he's doing here is really the word art.
Cool stuff. I like it.
Who is your selection for actor?
I have the lead from a movie I already talked about, which was The Disciple. The lead actor in that movie is Aditya Modak. Won't rehash too much of what I said about The Disciple, except that this movie is sort of impressive for how he has to, you know, embody this character over quite a long period of time. We meet him in his 20s, like I said. when we make that jump forward in time, he suddenly has a mustache. He's gained a lot of weight. And so much of what he processes in terms of his relationship to his craft is so interior. It's really not a explosive or greatly expressive kind of performance. You feel that it's all just a little bit beneath the surface as he's kind of deciding how to move forward and what is best for him. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I thought it was really good. Aditya Modak from The Disciple.
Awesome.
Who's your favorite actress of the year so far?
My favorite actress, we talked about at the very beginning of the episode, that being Sophia Koppel, the lead in Pleasure. So I will be deferring this time instead to another actress who I felt very pained not to be able to talk about, but I'm gonna cheat and do it anyways. That being Thuso Mdebu, the lead actress in the Amazon limited series, The Underground Railroad. I didn't know for about the first half, I'd say, of that project what to think about her. She's doing a lot of restrained work. She's not really talking. She's barely indicating. She very much just looks like someone caught in the headlights who is a prisoner. And then as the project continues, you realize how impressive that role that she's doing is, and the interiority that she's able to translate silently, and the way that she carries herself to depict how defeated she is and somehow has this will to move on. I think that it's an incredible performance from an actress that I was previously totally unfamiliar with. She was completely off my radar, and I think that she's just one of the greatest gifts that I've found in viewing cinema, however you want to frame that word, or, I could say in the lens format language this year.
Good show. I'm only on episode 3 now, so I have a ways to go, but I dig it thus far.
She's terrific. Who is your selection for Best Actress?
I have an actress from a movie called Hope, which is a European film. The lead actress's name is Andrea Brian Hovig. I'm probably not pronouncing that quite right, but this...
Good attempt.
I try. The star is Stellan Skarsgård as well. It's largely autobiographical, if I understand correctly. The director's name is Maria Sodal. It's about her experience with cancer. I kind of like this movie for how it kind of starts in media res. It's like a year after this woman has already been diagnosed with and treated somewhat for cancer, and we meet her around Christmas time where she realizes that this is coming, where the cancer is coming back, and her marriage is really at a rocky place, and it's about, like, what do you do maritally, romantically, when you don't know that you're going to come out of something alive? Do you spend the rest of this time with this person? Do you break it off? What do you do in that situation? And really hard truths end up coming out between this couple as they navigate this situation. She has a couple kids of her own. She's a stepmom to a couple of Stellan Skarsgård's kids. One of the more memorable scenes in this movie is where she sort of bursts, like this emotion kind of bursts out of her, and she starts talking about the difference between how she feels about her kids versus his kids. One of the more striking scenes in the movie for just how kind of raw and unfiltered it is. That's what really is so striking about this movie. And it's just not cloying in the way so many kind of cancer dramas can be. It's very, I think, sensitive and smart. Her name is Andrea Brian Hovig in Hope.
You gotta see it. We did that first impression on it, but
that's right.
Sounds like it's a lot better than that trailer made it look.
Yeah, just as easily could have been in my top 10 for sure.
All right, on to number 3.
What's your number 3 of the year so far?
My number 3 is from a director that we've never talked about, and we don't talk about enough, and now we will spend 3 hours talking about. That director is Steven Soderbergh.
What?
With the film No Sudden Move.
You said a man want to see me.
Alley out back.
Can't come in here. What is he, white? Oh, boy. So what's the score? Boom, 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 boom.
We're sending a man that works in an office to pick something up. You are part of a babysitting team watching his family while he does it.
Good morning. Everything is normal, except...
What do you want?
Is that something you'd say? Normal Monday?
I'm gonna shoot you right now.
Can I go home now? Wait at the house after.
What do you mean after?
Right off of your
What is going
What's going on, big guy?
Yeah, what are we doing?
We're following instructions. Are you helping me or are you not helping me?
No.
Boom, boom, boom.
Thank you. Good setup, man.
Playing on HBO Max, and I think in limited runs in New York and LA. Unfortunately, I don't live there, so I can't see it on a big, beautiful screen, which is how this film should be watched. I already talked briefly about those lenses that they use. I think that I've heard a lot of people talk about it as a fisheye lens. I think there's an argument to be made that it is an anamorphic lens, like within that range, but I really don't see it as a fisheye the way that I would talk about The Favorite using a fisheye lens. I definitely get the sense that this is making it larger and almost bigger than life, like CinemaScope did. So I would definitely make that differentiation for anyone that's aware of the conversation happening around the use of lens. There's definitely no way to get in focus when you're close to an actor, so the only people in focus are going to be deeper in the frame because it is such a big, massive lens, but it's shooting multiple rooms, kind of almost looking two-dimensional a lot of times. It's got a giant, impressive cast. It's a very steely, kind of dark 50s looking film, which is when it's based. It is a noir. It's about Don Cheadle, who is kind of released from prison and looking for what his next steps are, and all of a sudden he's got a job and he's thrust arm in arm with Benicio del Toro to begin a job. And a third guy comes in, and there's an involvement with the family, which brings in Amy Seimetz, who is terrific in the piece. David Harbour plays her husband. He's equally funny. You have Bill Duke playing a pimp character, who's kind of the lead gangster here in Detroit. Or maybe it's Chicago. I can't remember the exact location. It's probably Chicago. It's a very fun tapestral film. It's filled with lots of different pieces that work cohesively, and I think this is one of those films where you might think that it's kind of empty at first after you watch it, and then you start talking about it and you point at things and you realize that thing is actually like informing you to think about that deeper, and that it's actually representing something in a way that a lot of films don't. And I love it. And as always, I love Soderbergh. That's the end of our 3-hour conversation about Steven Soderbergh. Tune in next week for 12 hours on Steven Soderbergh.
One I thought I was going to get to before this episode, and ended up watching other things, but it'll definitely happen before the end of the year, for sure.
It's a great film. I highly recommend it. HBO Max. What is your number 3, Michael?
My number 3 is called Anne at 13,000 Feet.
You are now queen of the world.
You feeling okay?
I want to work up until being able to go by myself.
Hands all the way up. Perfect.
Did you tell them that we were only casually dating and that it's not as serious as you said it was in front of them?
No, I didn't say that to them. You feel the lift off the ground, and you feel the plane climbing into the sky.
Which is directed by a filmmaker named Kozak Radwanski. He's a Canadian filmmaker. It's an English language film. The lead actress here is named Dara Campbell. This is more or less about a girl who's in her 20s or so and going through something like a kind of emotional, mental downward spiral. She's like a preschool teacher or a daycare school teacher. She is a little bit emotionally unstable at the moment. She is constantly sort of causing anxiety amongst her colleagues at work as she does some things as she exhibits some questionable behavior. She gets into a relationship with a guy she meets at a wedding. Very much a character study about a girl in emotional, mental turmoil. Really, really nicely acted by this lead, Derek Campbell. I can't put it too much better than one of the phrases that Cinema Guild uses, where they say it's a volatile mix of Dardenne brothers' immediacy and Cassavetes' naturalism, which I think pretty nicely sums up the sensibility here. Lots of movies on my list this year just so happen to be on the slower side of things pace-wise. This one is very much not that. This has some get up and go for sure as she kind of moves along this downward spiral. And the title, In at 13,000 Feet, alludes to the fact that she has taken up this interest in skydiving after doing it with some friends, I think, for a bachelorette party. And I kind of like that it's not used like too explicitly as a metaphor. It's kind of like subtext that's elevated to the level of text. It is just something that she is doing. But it sort of nicely echoes, the fact that she is very much falling apart. Quite a roller coaster, that is for sure. And that comes out later this year, I believe. I listened to one interview with the guy from Cinema Guild who said that they were kind of ready to go with it, like pre-COVID, and then they just decided to sit on it for the entirety of COVID because it's one they really wanted to put out in theaters. So hopefully I believe it will be later this year.
Yeah, that sounds like a film I think we covered on the show earlier, Christiane F., where a girl bottoms out.
No drug use here, fortunately.
Yeah, but just the slow to fast downward spiral.
Yes, that also is a rough ride. Where are we at? We are
on to your favorite documentary of the year.
Skipping yours. Yours was All Light Everywhere?
Correct.
Cool. Mine is... it is called A River Runs, Turns, Erases, Replaces. We talked about this on our Hot Docs episode. This is a portrait of Wuhan, China, shot primarily through these sort of wide shots that show us different sections of Wuhan from all these different angles that really kind of underscore the kind of development of the city's infrastructure over time. One thing I learned about it is that it actually unfolds kind of in reverse chronological order, where we open with a shot that shows us Wuhan coming out of lockdown from the pandemic in this long take that shows us the sirens that I think most people are kind of familiar with if they've followed Wuhan throughout the pandemic. But then the rest of the movie is actually all from pre-COVID, and it's just about, and that's what the director was originally interested in, was just in kind of portraying the city's transformation. It's her home city. At the time that we talked about it, I was thinking a lot about the work of Jia Zhengke, the Chinese filmmaker who's very interested in kind of China's transformations in this century. But more recently I've thought about the work of James Benning, the experimental filmmaker who has made films like 10 Skies and 13 Lakes, which employ these kind of similar approaches where there is sort of a self-imposed constraint the filmmaker puts on themselves where, she's never moving the camera. She's never using close-ups. She's just using wide shots. And I like that idea of filmmakers kind of setting certain boundaries for themselves and trying to find kind of expansiveness and ideas within a framework. I think there's just a kind of formal rigor to this kind of approach that I think most people will find just terribly boring. It's a unique sensibility for sure, or maybe I don't know, a not terribly popular sensibility. We'll put it that way. But I think it's very interesting and well shot movie. So that is A River Runs, Turns, Erases, Replaces.
Most importantly, there is an ox that shits in the water.
That is apparently Taylor's favorite scene.
That is my favorite scene. All right, Michael, we are on to our number 2 favorite films of the year so far. And in fitting order, my number 2 is not, in fact, a film, but rather the 585-minute limited series from Barry Jenkins, The Underground Railroad, on Amazon Prime.
Ere I saw a dappled wonder settling across the fields, hovering on angel wings, brandishing a blazing shield.
Where do they go? The ones that run away and never return.
There is nothing here but suffering. Pain and suffering. It is time to go.
The girl in that bulletin is wanted for the murder of a child.
Man lost my mom, then me. Ain't no way he ever given up on finding me.
This is an adaptation of the, I guess, was it fantastical or was it fiction when you read the novel, Michael? It's unclear to me whether it is more fantasy in the novel or if this was I haven't read it myself, or if it was just a fictional piece.
It very much adheres to the book in so far as it, imagines that the railroad itself is real. That element is consistently fantastic in both.
Yeah, it's fantastical, but it's very much a fiction that's very it's depicting a lot of harsh things that are true, so I wouldn't really call it fantasy. I didn't know if there were some more fantastical elements maybe within the novel, but it's very much just a slightly more hopeful underground situation in a very harrowing above ground situation. The synopsis of the limited series is as follows. Follow young Cora's journey as she makes a desperate bid for freedom in the antebellum South. After escaping her Georgia plantation for the rumored Underground Railroad, Cora discovers no mere metaphor, but an actual railroad full of engineers and conductors, and a secret network of tracks and tunnels beneath the southern soil. I think that's a pretty accurate description of the project. It does not talk about how harrowing these scenes are. I think the most brutal and unfortunately cheesy scene is the end of that episode 1, which is a depiction of horror. But unfortunately, it uses CG to communicate something that probably did really happen. I don't know the details about where they're making that reference from, or if that's historically, tracked anywhere. But basically, a man is burnt alive, and the fire is incredibly fake, and it really kind of undercuts what is otherwise a very emotional moment and a crescendo to the beginning of this series as we get the locomotive started both within the project and the project itself. Joel Edgerton plays a supporting actor who is chasing her the entire time, essentially, and he plays a very fraught, concerned, hand-wringing type of a character who's very much a grown teenage boy. He's filled with bravado but empty of semantics and understanding and diction of thought. He's very much just someone who does a deed and never really put any thought into it. And there's also a young boy who plays Homer by the name of Chase W. Dillon, and he has what is easily the best performance by a kid this year, child actor, whatever you want to say, in quite some time. I think really for me it'd be Leave No Trace would be the last time that I thought a younger actor really just swept me away. This is a young boy who is black but doesn't act at all like he's black, and is traveling with Joel Edgerton, and he's put in these very odd situations, and there's not really a right way to talk about it. It's something you have to experience, and the sense that you get from his looks. It's an incredible project and a terrific ride. I don't want to talk about it further without spoiling anything, but I do think this is, if you spend time with a limited series that's come out already this year, I think this is the one to prioritize.
Yeah, I like it a lot so far. I've kind of been thinking about that one in terms of it's sort of like recognizing that sometimes just realism is not enough to represent certain things, certain experiences, and the idea that the railroad itself was not an actual train that ran beneath the ground, but in order to like appreciate just how much hope the existence of this network, what that meant to people in terms of the hope it offered, you almost have to have something like fantastical, because it would have been so important to you when your circumstances were so extremely awful.
I completely agree. I think that I would also map that further, and not just about the book itself, but I think that sometimes realism can't properly articulate something that is real. And I think Jenkins really balances that as a filmmaker or a director or a lens craft worker beautifully. I think in If Beale Street Could Talk, there's that violent scene on the corner that I think, it's very heightened. It's very, played up to really help you understand stuff. The moment with Dave Franco where they're looking for a flat. Right? Like all that stuff is a little bit bigger than life. And I think that that's what Jenkins is good at. He's finding these real things and then finding a way to make them bigger than life and dramatic so that you can understand what really occurred.
Yeah, for sure. I have more to go.
That is The Underground Railroad, now available on Amazon Prime. What is your number 2 favorite film of the year, Michael?
It is Days. From Taiwanese filmmaker Siming Leong. I want to say this is like his 9th or 10th film, perhaps. This one is set in Bangkok. It's a film with little to no dialogue throughout the entirety of it. We follow 2 different men, both of whom, for most of the movie, are kind of going about their ordinary daily lives. We watch each of them in parallel until they meet up at a certain point and for a transactional sexual encounter that is really just as is no less moving for the fact that it is ultimately a transactional experience. One is paying the other for the pleasure given and received, and then they go their separate ways after this experience after it has happened towards the end of the movie. So plot-wise, very minimal, that is for sure. It's a very still movie, not a great deal of camera movement. That's probably one of my themes this year across my top 10, coincidentally. It stars one of Psy's longtime muses, Lee Kang-shang, and I think you can maybe call it a work of docu-fiction to some extent because of how it incorporates some elements of Lee Kang-shang's real life, like the fact that he's had this neck ailment that has troubled him for many years, I think, and that has been depicted in other films of size as well. And we watch some of the treatment he gets to try and alleviate some of this pain and discomfort he experiences. That's incredibly moving. It's incredible just how tactile some of these compositions are, which are always very still, and really it just feels like it's just kind of one masterpiece after another in these shot compositions, and how tangible some of this skin and flesh in these guys' bodies feel as they do their kind of ordinary daily routines. Not one that I would say people need to worry about if they're worried about subtitles, because there are practically no subtitles to read. It's just a very quiet, minimalistic film, but I think it's a very moving one and ravishingly shot. That is Days, and that comes out in a couple of weeks from Grasshopper.
I'm looking forward to it. On to favorite classic discoveries of the year, Michael. To keep the theme going, I'm going to talk about a documentary released in 1976 from the filmmaker Barbara Koppel. This film is called Harlan County, USA. I'll give you the brief synopsis as listed on Letterboxd. This film documents the coal miners' strike against the Brookside mine of Eastover Mining Company in the Harlan County of Kentucky in the year 1973. Eastover's refusal to sign a contract when the miners joined with the United Mine Workers of America led to the strike, which lasted more than a year, included violent battles between gun-toting company thugs, scabs, and the picketing miners and their supportive womenfolk. Director Barbara Koppel puts the strike into perspective by giving us background on the historical plight of the miners and some history of the UMWA, the UMWA being that union that they joined, the United Mine Workers of America. This film is one that I just popped on. I sorted HBO Max by highest rated unwatched on Letterboxd and then picked documentary because I felt like a documentary, and I clicked play, and by golly, I had one of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my entire life. This is a harrowing depiction. It mentions in that synopsis that there's scabs and these company thugs, but you actually see on screen trucks come by with thugs that are brandishing weapons, and people, I mean, I will spoil it because it came out in 1976. People get killed in this over this this union strike, and the company is brutal, and they often have no comment, stay off screen, but you see their enforcers and their thugs within the frame of the camera, and their brutality and their brutishness. I think at one point they're picketing on the way to work, and someone swerves in to try to hit the picketing miners at a very high speed, and they barely don't get clipped. You know, it's a tremendously paced kind of documentary where you're constantly involved, and it seems like it's going slow, but you're kind of not taking a breath. You're waiting to relax, and there just is no ability to relax. It's I think the most interesting depiction of the need for unionization, or perhaps the argument for unionization in certain situations. That subject is obviously coming up a lot recently with the issues going on with Amazon drivers and Amazon factory workers. That is very highly depicted in the news right now with their difficulties having to go to the bathroom in bags, or having to take breaks in which they can't actually reach a break room. So I think that Harlan County, USA is available on HBO Max. It's available on Criterion. I think it's a harrowing documentary, but it's a documentary that's effusive in its look at the stark realities. It's non-judgmental, and it lets everything speak for itself. And when you watch everything that speaks for itself, it's pretty damnable how corrupt the anti-union sentiments were by that mining company.
This is a blind spot for me. One that has definitely been on my watch list for a long time. Sometimes that's what you got to do to watch these, is just sort by popularity and go for one of those, and don't think too much about it.
Well,
you
end up with the 5 stars. Rated.
Highest rated. Yeah. Not most popular, highest rated. There you go.
Yeah, most popular is how we watch,
other stuff.
Black Widow.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
All right. What is your favorite classical discovery of the year, Michael?
Mine's a little bit of a cheat. I'm not going with a particular title, but rather a collection of shorts, which are a collection of shorts by the Italian filmmaker Vittorio De Sica, and there were 8 to 10 shorts or so that he made, I want to say in the late 50s, over a 10-year period or so, mid-50s to maybe mid-60s, in which he documents Italian working class life. Most of these shorts, if I'm remembering correctly, are anywhere from kind of like 10 to 20 minutes. There is one that focuses on wheat farmers. There's one that focuses on fishermen. There's one that focuses on miners. They all start in kind of a similar fashion with some on-screen text that just kind of sets the stage for you, tells you where you are, what you're about to see, the people you're about to watch, but there's no narration, there's no dialogue. They're very, very visually driven. They're non-fiction, but they feel like these miraculous little poems, and how they're edited with these jump cuts. They're shot so much with the focus on kind of earthly beauty and the relationship between these people as they kind of work off the land that is just one after the next. Just feels like a miracle, and how kind of small but so dense with beauty they are. They're ones that I think Scorsese's foundation restored at some point. That's probably why they look as good as they do. These are all on the Criterion channel at the moment. The one about fishermen in particular feels like one of the most action-packed pieces of cinema I've seen all year. It's thrilling to see as he edits it with this really kind of rapid pace, and these guys are spearfishing. It's incredible. And they're bite-sized. They are very, very doable. So highly recommended. Those are all by Vittorio De Sitta.
I have tons of blind spots there, and I feel like I need to watch that collection. So I will be referencing the links in your Letterboxd shortly. All right, Michael, we are on to our number one film of the year so far. Are you ready?
Don't want to save it for next time, maybe?
Maybe next time. Yeah, let's end the episode here.
Oh, no, all right. Let's do it.
All right, Michael. My number one film is, as I explained to you earlier, actually two parts. One part is largely undistributed. The film itself is not even out. This is Gaspar Noé's Lux Aeterna, with the first part being The Art of Filmmaking, which shows a psychotropic, psychedelic experience over The King of Kings, or some scenes from The King of Kings by Cecil B. DeMille, in which there is a constant strobing effect behind it, and it is, I would say, hallucinatory, invoking, if not, thought-provoking at minimum. The film Lux Aeterna itself stars Charlotte Gainsbourg as well as Beatrice Dalle. This film is about a artistic process becoming the crucifixion, essentially, of all of those who are laboring for the art, and the crucifixion by those who have the funds or the animosity towards the what I would say are the innocent parties. I don't think that anyone here is actually innocent, but I do think that everyone here is actually innocent of anything to be guilty of within the frame. These are all real people, so they're guilty of tons of things outside of the context of the film. But within the framework, those who are punished, I think, are largely all innocent. And it's a fascinating observation of film to start with this artifact of great, tremendous by Cecil B. DeMille, in which the framing and the pageantry and the set decoration and the nuance to every little thing, and being presented in this strobing effect, and really appreciating kind of like each individual image from the strobing effect and how perfectly framed it is, really sets up a way of looking at the film. The film Lux Aeterna itself, if you remove The Art of Filmmaking, starts with kind of a historical look at torture devices for witches, and they're sitting in these armchairs at the beginning of the film talking, and Dahl asks to see Charlotte's ears, and she looks and she says, "Oh yeah, yours aren't cut, your lobes aren't cut either, you'd also be a witch." And it's just these little anecdotes that build in the previous part of the film into the film proper. And everything's kind of building and informing itself. This was famously one of the, Saint Laurent short films that were commissioned from a bunch of different filmmakers. Jonathan Glazer's one that actually came due. But in true Gaspar Noé fashion, his got so unwieldy and away from him that I think they dropped it, but they still are associated, but they never put it out. Because Noé had to go bigger than whatever it was that they wanted to do, which is delightful in and of itself, that his film, he's abusing the producer's money on just like the meta aspect of the content of the film there is superb. There's a couple quotes that I did want to get to, one of which being a quote by Dreyer near the very beginning of the film. You know that this is Noe talking to you, and I didn't get it perfectly because the translation is a little bit off and it went really fast, but it essentially says, "We filmmakers have a big responsibility to raise the industry into an art form." And I think that is exactly an examination of what the entire film does. There's also another moment that I think is entirely why I love films like this, why I love filmmakers like Noe, why I responded so positively to Waves. This is from Dale. She says, "A film that she wants to watch. I need to get inspired or carried away. It's like drugs." And I think that really cements maybe what I'm looking for too in film. I need to be carried away. I need to be taken away. And yes, as she mentions and then trails off, it is like drugs. And then she goes on to say something like, why did I go to drugs? She starts self-examining. But that is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to be taken somewhere and really committed into a new experience where I get off the ride having had a very experiential time where my entire body had reacted and I couldn't control it, essentially. And that is what this film does for me, and I think what this film may do for many others. That is Lux Aeterna, which in Latin means eternal light, and it is by far my favorite film of the year.
This is one that I feel like is the kind of thing we do a disservice to when we primarily talk about movies in terms of like features and shorts, because it's right in the middle. It's like, depending on whether you watch it with that intro or not, it's 50 to 65 minutes or something like that, which is more like medium length film. And I feel like some people use that term, but too often something of that length ends up slipping through the cracks just because people aren't used to it. Yeah, but like the film doesn't need to be any longer or any shorter than how long it is. But I hope, something like Movie or one of those services picks it up eventually. I would think so, but we'll see. Yeah, fingers crossed.
I mean, it should have been distributed back in 2019, so fingers crossed. It is beautiful, and if you get a chance to see it through stan.au in Australia, you can at least see part of it, if not The Art of Filmmaking. I don't know that that'll ever be properly released.
Yeah.
What is your favorite film of the year so far, Michael?
What I have in my number one slot is called Beginning.
نخته
خانزاری
نه؟
خانزاری
hayır. خنزرتن დაკავშირებით მომხსნამ და მე შეკითხვა. შეიძლება შემოვიდეთ.
რატომ სთხოვა იეჰოვამ აბრამს თავისი ერთადერთი ვაჟის სკვერბად შეწირვა?
Which is a Georgian film. The director's name is Dea Kulumbaygashvili.
Say it 3 times fast for me.
That one was hard enough. This is a debut film. I think I read that it's the first Georgian film to ever play in the main competition at the New York Film Festival. This is one that was like supposed to play at Cannes 2020. Before that got canceled, it maybe played in like the small edition that eventually happened or something like that. But it's on Mubi now. This is set in Georgia. It's set within a Jehovah's Witness community. We primarily follow a woman named Yana, who is the wife of the community's leader, as she experiences this kind of psychological breakdown that's kind of related to both the religious community, this very patriarchal, disciplined community, as well as sort of pressure applied by violent extremists that have started to attack the community. It starts with what I think is maybe one of the more like jolting and memorable opening scenes in recent memory, where we are in this church and her husband, our main character's husband, is giving this sermon, and the camera's kind of parked in the aisle of the church and watching him deliver this sermon in a long take. And maybe a third of the way through this take, we see this Molotov cocktail come flying through the window from someone off screen, and the room kind of erupts in chaos, and people are panicked and trying to get out of the room, and the camera just remains totally fixed in this position and kind of watches everyone scramble. And right away, you're like, what am I in for? It's very harrowing, but a real jolt to the system immediately. And as we follow this character, as she really sort of struggles with where she is psychologically in a very, very serious way, the movie's sort of interesting for how it alternates between moments like that one that are very harrowing and others that are very, very serene and almost like peaceful and tranquil. There's this much talked about scene where she goes with her son to the woods nearby just for like a little afternoon, and she ends up laying down in the woods as he's playing, and we watch her just like rest on the floor of these woods for minutes on end in this long take that's at kind of this odd, just slightly off angle, and you're just kind of listening to the noise in the woods, and it's so in contrast with the very dark material we see elsewhere. It's just an extraordinarily beautiful movie to look at. It's very, very beautifully composed. If there's ever a film that needs a trigger warning, I would say this is definitely one. It's not much of a spoiler. I think it's worth saying that there is a rape scene that I think is easily one of the most like disturbing I've seen in a long while. And I don't reward things that are disturbing just for the sake of being disturbing. They have to have value, they have to have purpose, and I think this definitely has that, but it is quite shocking when it happens. But yeah, man, the command of craft in this movie, especially from someone who's never made a movie before, is just next level. I've heard some people talk about how this movie and a couple other Georgian movies that have premiered over the festival circuit over the past year may be kind of representing kind of a new Georgian new wave, with some other films that have been highly acclaimed, this being one of them. So heavy stuff, but really beautiful stuff. It's called Beginning, and that's on Mubi streaming there, and available for rental on VOD.
I need to see it. That sounds like one hell of a directorial debut.
That it is.
All right, Michael. Well, that is the end of the year so far.
We'll just keep going.
I guess.
That's another one in the can.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.